Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for a journey into the absolute bedrock of existential philosophy.
We really are.
We're confronting one of the most fundamental and, frankly, terrifying questions a human can ask.
Yeah.
Why bother?
What's the point?
Exactly.
Mm.
We're taking a deep, deep dive into the work of Albert Camus, specifically his landmark 1942 philosophical essay, The Myth of Sisyphus.
A book that has lost none of its punch, I think.
Not at all. So the mission today is, well, it's a rigorous one, but I think it's incredibly rewarding.
For sure.
We've compiled a stack of sources that do a brilliant job of distilling this really complex body of thought into something clear, something you can almost, act on.
Right.
Our goal is for you to walk away with a kind of shortcut to understanding the absurd life and, maybe surprisingly, Camus' profoundly courageous answer to despair.
It's not a depressing book, which is what people often think.
No, it's the opposite. We want to show how facing that void, that meaninglessness, can actually unlock a kind of radical freedom.
Yeah.
But the starting point for this whole thing is, it's alarming, but it's crucial. Camus puts it right at the very beginning of his book.
He doesn't pull any punches.
No, he just asks, if life has no inherent meaning, if everything just ends in extinction, is it still worth living?
And that is the core conflict that drives Camus. And it's precisely why this work is still so intensely relevant today.
Absolutely.
If you have ever felt that crushing weight of, modern life's lack of a big cosmic meaning, or if you just feel overwhelmed by this relentless, often futile-seeming search for purpose.
Which is pretty much everyone at some point.
It's everyone. This text is your mirror. Our sources really position the myth of Sisyphus not as like a manual for depression or nihilism, but as a profound intellectual and moral challenge.
A challenge to what, exactly?
A challenge to courage.
A challenge to courage. I love that. That's the perfect framing.
Right.
Because when we hear terms like absurdist philosophy, it's so often tossed around as if it means pessimism or nihilism.
But it's not that at all.
It's the exact opposite. Camus is demanding this radical, intense engagement with life because of its fundamental meaninglessness, not in spite of it.
Precisely. He's taking the worst possible premise you can imagine, that nothing matters.
Right, the absolute bottom.
And he's turning it into the greatest possible license to live.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he challenges everything we sort of inherently believe about purpose, about destiny, the whole human struggle. He pushes us to find a reason to keep living, not by ignoring the absurd.
Not by pretending it isn't there.
But by being willing to stare it right in the face, acknowledge it fully, and then operate within its confines without blinking.
Okay, let's unpack this with the precision it deserves. We have to start by defining the absurd.
We do.
Because, like we said, in everyday conversation, we use the word to mean ridiculous or illogical, but Camus gives it a very specific, a very philosophical definition.
Yeah, and it requires us to understand the relationship between, the human mind and the universe.
So what exactly is the absurd condition for him?
The key concept is the contradiction. That's the word to hang on to. The absurd is not just that the universe is chaotic or irrational, though it certainly seems that way to us. For Camus, the absurd is the permanent, irreconcilable tension between what we, as conscious, reasoning, meaning-making human beings, demand from the universe.
Yeah.
And the universe's absolute, utter refusal to provide it.
So it's a conflict. It's inherent in the very structure of existence. It's a mismatch between the seeker and the sought.
A perpetual state of friction. That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so to understand the depth of this friction, we really need to detail the human side of that equation. What are the specific things we crave? What is this human demand that the universe just keeps denying?
Well, our sources lay this out beautifully. Humans crave sort of four things above all else, and they're deeply rooted in our need for psychological survival.
Okay, what are they?
Clarity, purpose, unity, and cosmic reassurance.
Cosmic reassurance. I like that.
Yeah, we are pattern-seeking creatures. We evolve to construct narratives, to make sense of things. We want to believe there's an underlying structure, a reason for our suffering, a narrative arc to our lives, and, some ultimate judge or scoreboard at the end.
We desperately search for order, for a meaning that goes beyond our brief little existence.
We spend our entire lives constructing these narratives, whether they're cultural, religious, scientific, or just personal.
Right. We try to justify the suffering, to explain the randomness, and to give this sort of eternal weight to our fleeting achievements.
It's almost impossible for us not to ask why. It's what our brains do.
So that's the human demand. And what's the universe's crushing response to that?
Silence.
Yeah.
Just absolute silence. The universe remains profoundly mute and indifferent.
It doesn't care.
It doesn't care. Meaning is not delivered to us prepackaged.
Yeah.
Purpose is not some external object out there waiting to be discovered. Life is fundamentally irrational, it's random, and it's unexplainable.
It just is.
It just is. There's
Well,
no inherent divine script, no easy answer whisper from the stars, no rational cosmic organization waiting for us to figure it out.
you know, that silence, that indifference is arguably the most terrifying realization for the human mind.
I think so.
We can accept the complexity of physics or the vastness of space, but we struggle so much to accept the fundamental indifference of existence itself. We crave a personalized response.
And we get the echo of our own voice back. That's it.
Wow.
And that's exactly it. The absurd exists purely in that tension point between those two irreconcilable forces.
The friction.
The friction.
Yeah.
It's caused by the conscious human mind demanding order, logic, and purpose, slammed up against this vast, mute, disorderly world that offers none of those things.
So it's like demanding a mirror that reflects meaning back to you.
And instead, you're just seeing a wall of glass. That tension is the absurd.
What's so fascinating about Camus' definition is that it means the absurd isn't a property of the world alone.
No.
And it's not a property of the human mind alone.
Right.
It's the constant, painful, and kind of necessary interaction between the two. You can't eliminate one without eliminating the conflict.
And that is the brilliance of his argument. You cannot find ultimate logic in the universe. That door's just closed.
Right.
And you cannot stop the human mind from searching for it. That is our nature.
So we're trapped.
We are therefore trapped in that contradiction. But recognizing that trap, accepting that permanent friction, that is the critical first step toward the freedom that Camus offers.
Okay, so if that permanent contradiction is where we live, then Camus begins his response by addressing the most radical consequence of recognizing that.
He goes right for the jugular.
He does. He asks the most alarming, but I think the most intellectually honest question, should I kill myself?
And he begins the entire essay with the premise that suicide is the one truly serious philosophical problem. It flows directly from recognizing meaninglessness.
It's a logical conclusion, in a way.
It is. If there is no purpose, if all suffering is ultimately just erased by death, why bother continuing the struggle?
And he's very clear, this is a philosophical inquiry.
Yes, he frames it explicitly as that. An analysis of self-destruction as a logical, potential response to the absurd, completely stripped of all moral or societal judgment.
He's really just asking, does this solution actually resolve the philosophical problem? It's a pragmatic, almost cold-eyed look at non-existence.
Right. If life is meaningless, isn't non-existence the most efficient and logical conclusion?
And many thinkers before him concluded exactly that it was.
They did. But Camus delivers this bold, radical answer. Suicide is the ultimate surrender.
It's giving up.
It is a form of resignation, an admission of defeat to the absurd. And critically, it does not solve the absurd condition. It merely eliminates the experiencer.
The only conscious part of the equation.
The only part that recognized the absurd in the first place.
I think we need to dive deeper into that, the difference between eradication and escape, because this is so often misinterpreted.
It is.
If I end my life, I certainly escaped the subjective pain of the contradiction.
Of course.
But Camus says I haven't solved the problem of meaninglessness for the universe.
Precisely. By choosing non-existence, you are not transcending meaninglessness. You are confirming it.
Right.
And, crucially, you are erasing the only chance, the only possibility of meaning.
The potential is gone.
The potential is gone. The universe remains silent. The absurd contradiction still exists in the abstract, even if you are no longer there to perceive it.
Okay, but I want to pause here and maybe challenge Camus a bit.
Please do.
For a truly rational nihilist, someone who believes with cold certainty that existence is objectively worthless, couldn't the act of suicide be seen as a final, courageous act of intellectual honesty?
That's a great point.
I mean, it takes incredible conviction to physically follow through on such a bleak philosophy. How does Camus reconcile the physical courage required with his charge of philosophical cowardice?
That's a powerful and, I think, a necessary challenge. And Camus would agree that the act is physically courageous. Of course it is. But he's looking at the philosophical outcome. He would argue that the nihilist, by ending their life, is attempting to resolve the contradiction through annihilation.
By just getting rid of one side of it.
Exactly. They are betting that the conflict can only be solved by destroying the conscious demand for meaning. Camus says the true courage is maintaining the conflict, accepting the tension, and not resolving it.
In other words, suicide is the ultimate refusal to engage with the tension. And that tension, for Camus, is where all the potential of life and created meaning actually resides.
Exactly. By surrendering, you erase the very vehicle, your consciousness, that could have created subjective value and purpose in spite of the cosmic indifference.
So the first step is just stay in the game.
The immediate philosophical mandate for Camus is clear. We must reject the physical exit because it is a surrender to the very problem we are trying to resolve through philosophy. We have to stay alive to confront the silence, to maintain the tension.
Okay, so if staying alive is the first command, that's only step one.
It is. And Camus reserves his sharpest and most detailed critique for the second, and I think more insidious, form of surrender.
Which she calls philosophical suicide.
That's it.
And this is where it gets really interesting for me, because we're not talking about jumping off a cliff anymore. We're
Well,
talking about making a cognitive leap into a belief system. It's a form of intellectual escapism.
yes. Philosophical suicide is the act of refusing to sustain the uncomfortable, the painful tension of the absurd.
You can't handle it.
You can't handle the silence of the universe, so you intellectualize a way out. You jump to a comforting belief, a metaphysical solution that artificially resolves the contradiction for you.
You're just refusing to face the reality of the contradiction.
And you build an intellectual safety net instead.
And this is a critique that extends far beyond just organized religion, right?
Mhm.
It's a critique of any ultimate truth, any definitive explanation for existence that claims to have the answer to the universe's silence.
It absolutely is. Our source material details the wide range of metaphysical solutions that Camus critiques. This includes embracing concepts like God, fate, destiny, eternal justice,
Even political ideologies.
even deterministic historical materialism, yes. Thinkers who create these vast overarching systems that promise that everything will eventually make sense, even if it doesn't right now.
So all of those are intellectual frameworks designed to escape the current painful reality of meaninglessness.
They're designed to give you that cosmic reassurance that the universe refused to provide.
So you are basically trading rigorous intellectual honesty for profound psychological comfort.
That's it.
You're deciding that a specific belief is so desirable, you're willing to ignore the evidence of the universe's silence just to embrace it.
That's precisely the charge Camus levels. And he specifically targets some of the greatest minds of his time who went through the same existential crisis he did, but chose to resolve it through belief.
And the sources highlight his focus on Søren Kierkegaard.
His detailed focus on Kierkegaard's leap of faith as the prime example of philosophical suicide.
Okay, let's delve into that specific critique. Because Kierkegaard, a major father of existentialism himself, also recognized the irrationality of the world, the absurdity.
He was right there with Camus on that part.
But his response was completely different. He jumped into this deep, intensely personal, and often tortured Christian belief.
The key word there is jump.
Right.
Kierkegaard recognized the impossibility of rational meaning, and instead of staying with the irrationality, he made a leap into faith. He argued that the very paradoxical, irrational nature of faith, believing in the impossible, was what made it true and powerful.
So it was belief because it was absurd, not despite it.
Exactly.
But for Camus, that's a betrayal. Embracing the irrationality of faith means abandoning the very conscious reasoning that recognized the absurd in the first place.
Right. You are using an intellectual mechanism to shut down intellect itself.
It's a contradiction.
It's a philosophical resignation. You are sacrificing your intellectual integrity on the altar of spiritual comfort. Camus sees this as an act of cowardice. You're too afraid to stay present in the absence of meaning, so you invent a meaning that requires you to silence your critical mind.
So you might as well have physically ended your life.
From his perspective, yes, because the consciousness that recognized the contradiction has been put to sleep by doctrine or dogma.
You know, I find this demand for radical intellectual integrity to be the most demanding part of Camus's philosophy.
It's a high bar.
It is. He doesn't say go be happy. He says be honest. He rejects the leap because honesty is more important than comfort, even if that honesty requires extreme psychological discomfort.
The mandate is absolute. We must stare the absurd directly in the face without blinking, without creating narratives that make us feel better about the fundamental silence.
The courage he demands.
The courage Camus demands is the courage to stay conscious in the tension, refusing both the physical exit and the intellectual escape. He says we have to sustain the paradox. I demand meaning. The world is silent, and I will not run away from either fact.
And if you can maintain that tension, If you refuse to kill yourself and you refuse to believe in comforting illusions, then, and only then,
the true philosophical transformation can occur.
you become ready for the absurd life.
This is the pivot point in Camus' thought. It is the moment where the terror of meaninglessness transforms into this profound liberation.
Right.
Once you fully accept the three difficult truths we discussed, that the world is silent, death is absolute, and existence is irrational, you stop chasing external purpose.
And suddenly you're free.
You're free from the weight of cosmic expectations, free from the narrative structures imposed by religions or moralists or political ideologies that claim to know the ultimate direction of history.
That must be incredibly liberating, but what are the practical dangers of a philosophy that embraces total autonomy and internal rule writing? I mean, that sounds a little scary.
That's a fair point. And Camus is aware that without external rules, chaos could ensue. But he argues that since we have discarded universal external meaning, we are left with the only thing that matters: subjective meaning.
Meaning that we craft ourselves.
Crafted by conscious choice. The very realization that nothing matters in the long run allows you to focus all your energy on what matters right now.
So what does this absurd life actually look like in practice? Camus breaks this down into three essential pillars that define the person living without appeal to the external.
Right. Passion, revolt, and freedom.
Let's start with passion.
Passion is the first mandate, and it's critical. This is the commitment to living intensely and fully.
How so?
Since you know that life is finite, it's fragile, and it will be erased by death, the only logical ethical response is to maximize the quantity of your experience of the present moment.
Quantity. That's interesting.
Yeah, Camus is not concerned with the moral quality of your experiences, only their intensity and depth.
Wait, hold on. Quantity over quality, divorced from morality. I mean, critics often argue this sounds like an excuse for just hedonism or recklessness.
It can sound that way.
So what does Camus mean by maximizing experience if the moral compass is gone?
Camus is arguing against the idea that one experience, say praying or writing a symphony, is objectively better or more valuable than another. Like, I don't know, getting drunk or making a sudden intense connection with a stranger.
Because it all ends up in the same place.
Exactly. Since all experiences end in erasure, the only value they possess is the subjective intensity they provide while they last. The absurd man lives for the moment, seeking depth in every fleeting second.
So they embrace the sheer variety of human experience without judgment.
Without judgment, knowing that his life is measured by the sum of his moments, not the eternal significance of his achievements.
That reframes intensity itself as the meaning. The act of living fully is the purpose. Okay, I get that. What about the second pillar? Revolt.
Revolt is often misunderstood. For Camus, it's not primarily a call to political action, though he's certainly engaged in political revolt later in his life.
Okay.
It is fundamentally a daily metaphysical rebellion against meaninglessness. It's the continuous act of creating one's own engagement in the face of futility.
So, waking up every morning and choosing to engage, choosing to create, choosing to love, even though you know it all ultimately means nothing in the vast cosmic scheme, that is revolt.
That is the revolt.
It's a stubborn, conscious no to despair.
It is defiance without hope. You acknowledge the darkness, the silence, the ultimate futility, but you choose to light your own small fire anyway.
It's the moment the mind, knowing it is condemned, still chooses to assert its existence and its values.
Yes, a small act of absurd revolt might be finishing a challenging project, knowing it will eventually be forgotten, simply because the effort of creation is a defiance against the default state of non-meaning.
And this defiance leads directly into the third component, which is freedom.
Yes, the ultimate liberation. If you truly accept the absurd, the individual is no longer bound by illusions, be they religious, moral, or political.
So you are free to write your own rules.
Completely. No external authority, no divine judge, no historical determinism dictates meaning, purpose, or morality. You are completely autonomous.
But this must present a massive moral dilemma. If I am totally free to write my own rules and I define my meaning through intensity, how do I prevent my freedom from infringing on the freedom of others? Does Camus just ignore the fact that we live with other people?
He addresses this later in his work, particularly in The Rebel. But even in Sisyphus, the freedom is tempered by the concept of revolt.
How so?
The absurd man's freedom is born from the shared human condition, the shared trap of the absurd. True revolt, for Camus, is recognizing that we are all equally condemned, equally free, and equally responsible for our created values.
So there's a kind of solidarity there.
Yes, exactly. While he doesn't lay down specific moral dogma, his philosophy encourages a certain solidarity, a shared commitment to creation and living fully with others, because the only thing we truly have is our common time on Earth, experienced intensely.
That is the absurd freedom Camus celebrates. The very realization that was initially terrifying, that there is no meaning, becomes the source of intense joy and passionate living.
It provides the license to focus entirely on the present moment and the creative act.
And this brings us to the perfect, almost agonizing encapsulation of this philosophy, the myth of Sisyphus himself.
It's the perfect metaphor. To truly understand Camus's argument, we need to focus on the agonizing details of his punishment.
So for anyone who might not be familiar with the classical myth, Sisyphus was a king. He was known for his cunning and his deceit, and he managed to trick the gods multiple times.
Which is never a good idea.
Never a good idea. His punishment, handed down by the gods, was eternal damnation, specifically pushing a massive boulder up a steep mountain for the rest of eternity.
And the key element is that once the rock reaches the very top, it immediately rolls all the way back down again.
It is the definitive image of futility.
It really is. Our sources emphasize the three defining terrible traits of his task. It is a meaningless task, a repetitive prison, and a hopeless cycle.
Endless, exhausting labor without any potential for achievement, permanence, or external reward.
And Camus uses this as the perfect metaphor for the absurd human condition.
We build careers, we raise families, we seek knowledge, we fight for justice.
And then what happens?
Only for death, or the indifferent flow of history to roll the rock back down, erasing our struggles and achievements. Sisyphus's fate, in the grand cosmic scheme, is essentially our own.
But here is the central heroic twist. This is the genius of it. Camus views Sisyphus not as a victim, but as the ideal absurd hero.
Not a victim.
The hero. And it is crucial to understand why. It is not because he successfully completes the task or finds a way to cheat the gods again.
It's because he recognizes and accepts his fate.
He is conscious of the futility of his labor. He does not delude himself. He confronts the truth of his meaningless, repetitive existence every single day.
He has no hope of escape.
None. He is staring the absurd directly in the face.
And Camus focuses specifically on the moment that truly defines Sisyphus's freedom.
The moment of descent. That brief interval when Sisyphus has reached the peak, the rock has begun to roll, and he turns to descend the mountain to begin the task again.
That moment of descent must be just agonizing. It's the full realization of failure, the confirmation of eternal futility. So why does Camus treat this descent as Sisyphus's moment of triumph?
Because that descent is Sisyphus's moment of consciousness and truth. He is smarter than the gods who condemned him, because they condemned him to eternal, hopeless labor.
Right. The hopelessness was the point.
But Sisyphus, through his consciousness, eliminates hope and thus transcends the punishment. He sees the rock rolling down, accepts the truth of his predicament, and is superior to his fate precisely because he understands it fully.
He is, for that brief walk down the mountain, free.
Yes. By knowing his condition, he transcends the mental trap of the punishment. He achieves freedom not by changing the external reality of the boulder.
Which he can't do.
He can't. But by changing his internal relationship to that reality.
Exactly. This is the freedom of ownership. Sisyphus finds inner freedom because he owns the struggle. His fate belongs to him.
The gods created the punishment, but Sisyphus, through his consciousness, reclaims the action as his own. He decides to push. He chooses the intensity of the struggle.
And this ownership allows us to deconstruct that first powerful quote Camus provides. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart.
That is the ultimate absurd inversion. Meaning is found not in the result, which is zero, but in the exertion, in the effort, in the continuous present act of pushing.
If you accept that the destination is irrelevant,
then the journey, the quality of the immediate effort, becomes everything. The internal value of the struggle provides sufficient subjective meaning, regardless of the cosmic outcome.
the heart is filled by the choice to exert oneself, not by the achievement of a permanent goal.
Right. And then, the final, iconic line, which has baffled and inspired people for decades, and which seems the most paradoxical. One must imagine Sisyphus happy.
How? How can a man condemned to eternal meaningless labor be happy?
He is happy, not because the task is joyful, it is agonizing labor, but because happiness, in this context, is synonymous with ownership, consciousness, and acceptance.
So it's a different definition of happy.
A completely different one. It is the commitment to the struggle, regardless of the futility. By rejecting despair and rejecting the philosophical delusion of hope, Sisyphus masters his destiny. His rock is his rock, and he chooses to push it again.
And that choice, that recognition of his own strength and commitment, that's what makes him the hero.
Exactly.
So it means that happiness isn't an external reward waiting for us at the top of the mountain. Happiness is a condition of consciousness we apply to the reality we already inhabit.
It is an internal victory achieved through defiant acceptance.
And this just defies conventional morality and reward systems.
Completely. Sisyphus's happiness is derived solely from his own lucidity. It is not an emotional happiness, like joy. It is a profound philosophical satisfaction in the act of conscious revolt.
So after this deep dive into the absurd, into philosophical suicide, and into the hero Sisyphus, what's the ultimate takeaway? What does this entire process mean for us, the listener?
I think Camus wants us to fundamentally recalibrate our perspective. Meaninglessness is not a curse.
It is instead an invitation.
Yes, an invitation to stop searching for external justification, to stop waiting for purpose to arrive, and to start living with radical intensity right now. It forces all responsibility for meaning onto you, the individual.
In this invitation, it compels specific actions. Our sources list of mandates: to live passionately, love deeply, create bravely, and constantly rebel against despair and the temptation of comforting lies.
These are the active choices that define the absurd hero's life. Whether you are a writer, a parent, an engineer, or a clerk, doesn't matter what you do.
And this brings us to the final, crucial philosophical conclusion. We have to reiterate this because it is the ultimate reversal of conventional thought.
Meaning is not discovered.
It is not waiting out there in the universe for you to stumble upon like some forgotten treasure.
No. Meaning is created.
It is an internal, daily, moment-by-moment choice. It is the value we impose on our actions, knowing those actions are temporary and ultimately inconsequential in the long run.
The absence of external meaning forces the responsibility of creation entirely onto the individual. That is the great burden and the great liberation.
Think of every great achievement, every moment of profound, honest love, every courageous act you undertake.
Each one is a moment of created meaning, a defiance against the silence. It is purpose built from the ground up, not purpose handed down from above.
You are the sole architect.
You are.
And that is the final metaphor we must embrace. Every day, we pick up our boulder and push.
We all have our own boulder.
We do.
Yeah.
And we push not because it leads anywhere external. It won't. The rock always rolls back down. Not because it satisfies some cosmic requirement, but because pushing is living.
The commitment to action, that intensity of experience, that defiance, that is the meaning you create.
The struggle itself is enough.
It fills the heart because the conscious, free, defiant heart chose to exert the struggle.
So let's synthesize Camus's ultimate answer to the absurd. It is neither despair nor delusion.
Neither physical suicide nor philosophical escape.
It is courage.
It's courage. The courage to wake up every single day, confront the massive, indifferent silence of the world, and look back at it with complete lucidity and say,
I see the futility.
and I will live anyway. I will create anyway. I will love anyway.
So your personal takeaway from this deep dive into Camus and Sisyphus is, I think, threefold. 1, find joy in the struggle. The exertion itself, the conscious effort, is the reward.
2, create meaning where none is given. Be the architect of your own purpose, free from external judgment.
And 3, live as the hero of your own absurd existence. You are Sisyphus, and the quality of your descent, that daily moment of realizing the futility and choosing to turn back and push again, is a matter of your own consciousness and commitment.
That's everything.
So if you are entirely free to write your own rules, to define the struggle that fills your heart, what is the most passionate and intense experience you will choose to define your next struggle?
If you know the rock will always roll down, what direction will you choose to push today?
Think about that as you face the silence.